The airplane cabin buzzed with the usual chaos of boarding, passengers stowing bags, flight attendants directing traffic, overhead bins slamming shut. Among the crowd, one man stood out, not because of what he did, but because of the storm brewing around him. A white passenger's voice suddenly cut through the noise, sharp and angry, demanding attention. He pointed toward a black man seated quietly by the window, insisting he be removed. The tension in the cabin grew thick, whispers spreading, phones recording. The black man remained calm, his expression unreadable. But what happened next left everyone frozen in silence. One simple gesture turned humiliation into justice. The day had started like any other for Marcus Bennett. He was a man of discipline, calm by nature, and used to observing the world in silence. A seasoned traveler, he carried nothing but a small bag, a worn notebook, and the steady confidence of someone who knew who he was. To the outside world, Marcus looked like just another passenger, a middle-aged black man in a simple navy jacket, boarding a flight like hundreds of others. Few would have guessed the weight of responsibility he carried or the oath he had sworn to protect his country. The flight was a domestic connection, nothing unusual. Families bustled down the aisle, business travelers hunched over phones, and tired tourists clutched neck pillows. Marcus slipped into his seat by the window, greeted politely by a flight attendant, then settled with the patience of someone used to long hours of waiting. Across the aisle sat a passenger who seemed restless from the beginning. His expensive suit was slightly rumpled, his voice loud and demanding, his gestures sharp. He carried himself with entitlement, sighing when others brushed past him, rolling his eyes at every delay. His impatience was as noticeable as the gold watch glinting on his wrist. It didn't take long for his attention to drift toward Marcus. He studied him with narrowed eyes, whispering something to the passenger beside him. His glances grew more frequent, more pointed. By the time the plane's doors closed, the man's unease had transformed into something uglier, a sense of superiority that was about to erupt. The moment the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, the entitled passenger made his move. He pressed the call button sharply, waving down a flight attendant with exaggerated urgency. When she leaned over, he spoke in a tone that was both loud enough for others to hear and dripping with disdain. "I don't feel safe sitting near that man," he said, gesturing toward Marcus with a dismissive flick of his hand. The words rippled through the cabin. Conversations halted. Heads turned. Some passengers looked at Marcus with curiosity, others with quiet discomfort. Marcus himself remained still, his gaze fixed calmly on the window. He had heard words like this before. He knew what it felt like to be reduced to a stereotype, judged without reason. The flight attendant shifted uncomfortably, caught between professionalism and the growing tension. "Sir, is there a specific issue?" she asked softly. "Yes," the man snapped. "That man doesn't belong here. I don't know what he's hiding, but I'm not flying on this plane unless he's removed. Either he goes or I do." The cabin stirred uneasily. A mother hugged her child closer. Someone pulled out a phone and began recording. The entitled passenger's voice grew louder, fueled by the attention. He accused Marcus of looking suspicious, claimed he was making other passengers uncomfortable. Marcus sat quietly, neither defending himself nor reacting. His calmness seemed to infuriate the accuser even more. The louder the passenger grew, the more obvious his prejudice became. His words carried no logic, only fear dressed as arrogance. The flight attendants huddled briefly, whispering near the galley. Their faces betrayed concern. Removing a passenger could delay the flight, yet ignoring the complaint risked escalation. All the while, Marcus remained silent, his dignity intact. The entitled man, emboldened, now addressed the cabin directly. "I'm telling you all, we don't know who this man is. For all we know, he could be dangerous. Look at him. sitting there pretending to be calm. I refuse to be trapped in the air with someone like that. The injustice hung heavy. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Marcus with sympathy, others avoided eye contact, unwilling to get involved. It was the kind of moment that revealed society's fault lines, the divide between those who speak out and those who stay silent. Marcus finally turned, his head. His eyes met the accuser's, steady and unwavering. There was no anger, no fear, only a quiet strength that unsettled the man more than any outburst could have. But still, Marcus said nothing. The tension reached its breaking point. The flight attendants, visibly flustered, prepared to make a decision. The entitled passenger leaned back smugly, convinced his complaint would prevail. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, phones recording every second. Just as the situation threatened to spiral out of control, Marcus moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket pocket. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, every eye fixed on him. Even the entitled passenger stiffened, his accusations momentarily silenced by curiosity and fear. Marcus pulled out a slim leather wallet. He opened it with calm precision and held it up for the flight attendants and the entire row to see. Inside gleamed a badge, unmistakable and commanding, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The air shifted instantly. The smug expression drained from the accuser's face. The whispers turned into gasps. Passengers craned their necks for a clearer view. The very man he had tried to humiliate was not just an ordinary traveler. He was an FBI agent, entrusted with protecting the nation. Marcus's voice was steady, carrying the authority of truth. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to argue. The badge spoke louder than words ever could. The flight attendant straightened immediately, relief washing over her face. The entitled passenger, once so loud, now sat frozen in stunned silence. His arrogance crumbled into embarrassment, his confidence replaced by fear. He had demanded the removal of a man whose presence on the plane meant safety, not danger. Passengers who had been silent moments before now stared at the entitled man with open disapproval. Some shook their heads, others whispered criticisms. The tide had turned, completely. The accuser, once dominant, now sat trapped in the humiliation he had created for himself. The rest unfolded swiftly. The flight crew informed the captain, who made the decision without hesitation. The disruptive passenger would be escorted off the plane. Security was called, and within minutes, the entitled man was walked down the aisle, his once proud stride replaced with the shuffle of defeat. As he disappeared from view, a ripple of applause spread through the cabin. Not thunderous, not mocking, just a quiet, collective acknowledgement of justice. Marcus nodded politely, then returned to his seat by the window, calm as he had been from the beginning. He didn't bask in the attention, didn't gloat. His dignity was his shield, and it remained unbroken. The flight continued without further incident. Passengers occasionally glanced his way, some with gratitude, others with newfound respect. For many, it was a reminder that appearances deceive and prejudice blinds. Marcus, however, needed no validation. He had faced ugliness before and knew he would face it again. But this moment carried weight, not because he had silenced a racist voice, but because the world had witnessed a truth too often ignored. Racism thrives in silence, but dignity, patience, and truth can dismantle it in an instant. As the plane touched down hours later, Marcus collected his bag and left as quietly as he had arrived. He was not seeking glory. His life's work was built on duty, not recognition. But for everyone else on that flight, the memory would linger. The day a racist passenger tried to strip away a man's humanity, only to be stripped of his own pride instead. And the question remained, how many times do we judge others based on nothing but the color of their skin? How often do we fail to see the truth staring back at us? In the end, the answer was clear. Racism diminishes those who wield it, not those it targets.